The Miyoo Mini has been the $50 handheld for quite a while now. This is because it's so small, yet so good with the great buttons, great display, and how customizable it is. Quite recently, and I mean very recently, Anbernic released a direct competitor that I think absolutely crushes it right now in pretty much every way. This is the Anbernic RG35XX. The naming convention might not make any sense, but the existence of this device does. Let's dive right in. The exterior design consists of plastic and it feels really solid in hand. It's got some heft and the surface feels gritty, which adds some grip to this device, but it also makes it feel more retro, I suppose. It just feels great to hold, and while this device is small, it's not that small. In fact, it's much larger than a Miyoo Mini, but it is a great size for a handheld like this. On the front, you're going to find your usual set of buttons. These buttons feel pretty fantastic. The D-pad feels very solid and offers a lot of precision in games, while the face buttons are actually smaller than expected, but they feel great and work totally fine. I have no issues with the configuration, as even the start and select buttons are solid and not rubberized. I like it. On the back, you're going to find your shoulder buttons, which include R1, R2, L1, and L2. These feel very solid, and honestly, these are very easy to reach and to press, which is going to be very important for a system like this. On the bottom, you're going to find a USB-C port and a headphone jack. On the top, you're going to find a mini HDMI port, and on the right, you're going to find a sleep-wake button, a reset button, and two micro SD card slots. Then on the left, you're going to find a volume rocker. This device is really well designed, and there is still plenty of greatness to explore here. This device features a beautiful 3.5-inch 640 by 480 IPS display. It's got super thin bezels that go almost edge to edge on this device, and it works so nicely. This is easily one of the best displays on any retro handheld like this one of the more affordable ones though, if not the best one in general. I'm seriously surprised with what Anbernic did here, because this is a really good value device already thanks to the exterior design and this fantastic display. It also gets really bright, which is important for outdoors gaming. So yes, awesome display here. This device features a single front-firing speaker that sounds okay. It's doable, and I don't really expect much here, so it couldn't really possibly disappoint, but to be fair, it is a very affordable device. So have a listen. This device features a Cortex A9 CPU, PowerVR SGX544MP GPU, 256 megabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes of micro SD card storage included at the base, and a 2000 mAh battery. The specs are definitely underwhelming compared to what we are used to seeing, but this device is just a bit over $50, so I wouldn't really expect it to run anything past PlayStation 1 regardless. Though that battery is still pretty small nonetheless. So let's quickly go ahead and talk about the OS. It's fine for something that's meant to be plug and play, and that comes with so many games. It's a simple interface that looks pretty ugly, but it's much better than what the Miyoo Mini comes with by default in my opinion. But I would still hold on to maybe get some custom firmware that looks much better and that offers more settings for tinkering. But right now you get a simple interface that just works and does allow for some minor customization. You can customize some in-game elements through the menu button on the front while in-game, and it's all simple for anyone to get a good grasp on. So I'm fine with it, but custom firmware should improve the experience for enthusiasts. Now let's get into the actual gaming performance. So let's talk about Game Boy Color performance, and this is because this device looks like a Game Boy that I wanted to see how nice it was for using it as one, if that's what you wanted. And it's pretty good. The image is going to be a bit stretched and it will be noticeable, but it looks decent and it runs really well, honestly. No performance issues to speak of here with any game that I tested, but some of the pre-installed ROMs are not colored. For example, Pokemon Yellow on the GBC emulator is running on a grayscale, which defeats the purpose of the color moniker, but overall you should get a very solid Game Boy Color experience no matter what, and most people should be pretty happy with it. Now, GBA also runs really well here with some odd performance issues in some odd places, but they were so rare that they're hardly worth mentioning. It's pretty stable GBA performance here regardless of which game you're playing on it. For example, Pokemon games such as Pokemon Emerald will have no issues running on this device, and the same goes for something much more speedy like Sonic Advance 3, which also runs really well here. Overall, you should have a very pleasant GBA experience through this device, and I wouldn't worry too much for here. SNES performance is also great here. Every emulator and system that I have mentioned so far is very solid to run because they are so easy to run at this point. But seriously, this is pretty great. This is natively the best aspect ratio for this system, so SNES games in particular just look amazing on this device. So something like Mortal Kombat 3 will look and run beautifully on this device. So there really isn't too much to say here, as it just does everything as it's supposed to. This device is a master at running every system that it supports pretty well, I would say. And the last system that we will be testing on this device is going to be probably the highest end one that this device can run overall, PlayStation 1. With something like Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy 7, Mortal Kombat 4, and so much more, you just get really good performance here. I find it to be a very comfortable experience to play PlayStation 1 games on this device, whether it's a fighting game or a JRPG. I think that they really nailed it here when it comes to performance with very few stutters at all. And, you know, those stutters were still there, and I think that that is because of the small amount of RAM that we got. It would have been nice to have gotten at least 512 megabytes of RAM, but we are having to settle with 256 megabytes, which is kind of unfortunate, and I do think that it is hindering performance a little bit when it comes to the higher end games, but overall, it is still pretty good for what it is. Now, considering that this is a direct competitor, I wanted to dedicate a section to talking about the Miyoo Mini and how it stacks up against the RG35XX overall. The Miyoo Mini is a much smaller device than the RG35XX, and it's much more pocketable with a 2000 mAh battery. Performance between these two will be pretty much identical since they play the same systems for the most part. They both feature very solid buttons and D-pads, so the RG35XX has a lot more going for it in that regard, considering that it features a more manageable size with a gritty and very solid feel to it and a good amount of weight as well. It also has a beautiful display that's higher resolution, and honestly, because of the form factor and Anbernic's classic gray buttons, you're getting a great experience here, one that I think will be more suitable for most people. However, I can definitely still see the Miyoo Mini having a pretty big market and a lot of people still supporting it, considering that the Miyoo Mini is still a fantastic device and one that is still a lot more pocketable than the RG35XX, so it is worth keeping that into consideration. But in my opinion, what makes the Miyoo Mini better is probably going to be the battery life, considering that it has a less powerful display to power with the same battery size as the RG35XX, and the fact that it's also way smaller. So that should make it a lot more portable, just a lot easier to carry around. So I would say that those are the main selling points of the Miyoo Mini versus the RG35XX. So the battery life on this device kind of sucks. It lasts about 2 hours from my experience when playing PS1 games, which is kind of disappointing. It does have a very small battery, which doesn't help, but don't expect too much out of this device. So to conclude this video, I think that the RG35XX is a really good value system. While Anbernic has been releasing way too many systems as of lately, they've all been pretty good overall, and the RG35XX is no exception. I really like it and plan on doing a lot of retro gaming on it moving forward since it's so easy to carry around, and I've been going on a nostalgia trip for Game Boy games, so this system will sit right at home for me. And honestly, a lot of other people too. And for $55 roughly, you're getting a surprisingly good device. So would I recommend this over the Miyoo Mini? Personally, yes, I would. But because of the size differences, I'd argue that they still have different audiences, at least to some extent, because if you want pretty much everything that the RG35XX offers, but with a smaller form factor, then the Miyoo Mini is simply the best way to go. But the RG35XX is definitely worth considering if this is your budget. So with that said, highly recommended. So thank you so much for watching this video all the way up until the very end, because if you have, then I do very much appreciate it, and hopefully this video was helpful to you. Now I am going to be leaving affiliate links to Anbernic's website down below for this particular product, for the RG35XX. It's so that you can go ahead and get your own. If you do use my link, then you will be helping out the channel, which does help me in being able to get more retro handhelds and other kinds of stuff to review on the channel for you guys. So I would very much appreciate that. And also, please make sure to follow me on Instagram. And I do have a second channel that has been a lot more of a Yu-Gi-Oh channel as of late. If that's something that interests you, then by all means, go ahead and stop by. Now, with that said, this has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching, and until next time, enjoy.